This is The Sex That Got Away, Maxwell, the man who was twice my age. Part 1, How We Met. In September of 2006, I started a new job as an outside advertising sales rep for the Los Angeles Daily News. I had been promoted from executive assistant. I was given a pretty shitty underdeveloped sales territory, but I was happy to be in a career. I trained and learned all about the territory. 1 week into my new job, I got a promotion. One of my colleagues, Julie, was packing up and moving to Phoenix. She had the best territory too, with some healthy existing clients. Her remaining 2 weeks were spent training me on the territory. We went through the client list. She was very thorough and would take me out to meet them. Everyone loved her service. However, there was one client, the largest on the desk, which she avoided talking about or dealing with. When I would bring it up, she'd tell me that the owner, Maxwell Green, had paused his campaign for now and to check back with him in a couple of weeks. Of course, this would be after she was long gone. Julie left. Management was on me about why Duratex wasn't scheduled to run in October. I told my manager that he'd paused his campaign. That wasn't good enough. I had to call him immediately to schedule a face-to-face. So I called. He accepted the call. In my cheery new salesperson voice, I introduced myself as his new account manager. He was really dry. He wasn't excited or engaged. He just listened to me ramble. He wasn't at all interested in talking. I asked to meet with him. He told me he'd call me within the week to schedule the appointment. I accepted this as normal and hung up. I waited for his call, and it never came. Duratex was my desk's biggest client, so Maxwell was spending about $12,000 a month in advertising, and I was commission-based, so this was about a third of my income. The first rule of taking over a territory with existing clients is to make sure you meet with all existing clients and get them on contract for the next month or year. At the advisement of my manager, I took a cake to the company. Now, I had previously worked in a sales environment, and the account executive was big on taking corner bakery, cafes, chocolate cinnamon marble cake to her clients. It was $19.99 and a big hit with her clients. I dropped off the cake with Maxwell's oldest son, who was a VP at the company. A week passed, and I still heard nothing from him. The cake was supposed to at least get me a phone call from him. I called the office and asked for Maxwell. He accepted the phone call again. He was curt, but I remained upbeat and positive. I asked him if he was able to enjoy the cake I brought. What cake? The chocolate marble cake from Corner Bakery. I remember seeing it in the lunchroom, but I didn't know you brought it. He assumed it was from any one of his many vendors. He thanked me and softened a little. After a little conversation, I got to the point. He agreed to meet with me. Rule number 2 when you're taking over a new sales territory is to always take your manager with you on appointments with tough clients. Negotiations are easier and all the pressure isn't on the new sales representative. Although I thought my manager was a complete idiot, I took him anyway. I knew Maxwell was in his late 50s and my manager was too. I figured they'd have more in common. I didn't tell Max I was bringing my manager, but it was fine. We sat down and he immediately shared that he had told Julie that he was never running in the newspaper again. Running advertising. That she had continued to fax confidential documents to his office after he repeatedly asked her not to. He was really mean. My manager and I were shocked. We were blindsided and speechless. Everything made sense now, though. Once we recovered, we apologized. He opted to not make us suffer and agreed to hear what we had to say. There was a new initiative at the paper to convert newsprint clients to direct mail flyer programs. Duratex was the perfect company for this because they were trying to reach a specific demographic across a large territory. I knew little about the product, but my manager knew it well. I did what I did best at the time. It was sit there and speak on what I do know, quality customer service. My manager did a small pitch. It turned out that both the Los Angeles Times and the actual company that printed the flyers were pitching the product to Maxwell. However, we had different rates. My company's was the most expensive. And we all had different representatives who had certain styles of customer service. The next week, my manager and I returned to make our full presentation. I was more knowledgeable on the product, and Maxwell was listening. Everything was more relaxed. He made eye contact. My manager talked too much at times, and he ruined some moments with his phony laughter, and I did my best to balance out his oddness with sincerity. Maxwell was eating it up. I could tell he liked me as his new account manager, and I could tell he liked me. He told us he'd already met with the Times and the direct flyer company, and he'd review all the proposals and make a decision within the week. I told Maxwell I'd call him in a few days to follow up. So Maxwell was a very commanding man. He was 56, 6'2". His hair was all white. He was gruff. His voice was deep, and he was always well dressed. He was not my ideal man or what I would envision, but I don't think 56-year-old men are for most 28-year-olds. However, something about him, and I didn't know what it was at the time, however I do now, was incredibly sexy and attractive. I went to my follow-up appointment, but this time I went alone. I made sure my makeup was flawless. I had on my most sophisticated and sexy Ann Taylor black V-neck sweater. I put a mint in my mouth and I entered his office. I didn't wait long for him. He entered and immediately informed me that he decided to go with my paper for the flyer program. Even though our rates were slightly more expensive, he knew he'd get better customer service from us just based on the 3 weeks I had been working with him. When the business was over, he sat across from me and grabbed my hands into his hands and kissed them and told me that he thought I was beautiful. I was incredibly shocked, confused, and turned on. This is The Sex That Got Away, Maxwell, the Man Who Was Twice My Age, Part 2, Our Courtship. My main priority with Max was keeping business straight. I had never been in a position where someone whose decisions contributed to my income was also someone who was pursuing me romantically. Also, Max was very wealthy. In any normal, non-work related situation, I would have been skeptical as to why he was attracted to me outside of my looks and being younger. That would absolutely work for many women. However, being his partner in business, I believed his attraction could possibly be less superficial. Maybe he could like me for my mind, so I got into it, and it was important to me that he respect my business savvy and my intelligence. I continued to go to his office to finalize the advertising agreement. Every meeting was just the two of us. We flirted. Anytime I would call the office, calls were transferred immediately. He answered immediately when I called his cell phone. We began meeting for drinks and dinner at Fleming's Steakhouse, where he dined regularly. I did my best to balance business and personal. I handled business first because that was my money. I dated wealthy men, but I'd never dated a man who was twice my age, and I wasn't comfortable just rolling with it. I like being equals in relationships, and even if I can't match the wealth, I like to match the care. So as his account manager, I took advantage of work perks to take care of him, his company, and to show I appreciated him in his business. My company was having a sales incentive, and any client that purchased at least $10,000 in direct mail flyers in 1 month would win an LA Kings package in our suite at the Staples Center. The package included food and alcohol for 25 people. Max qualified, so I gave him the package. This was my first grand gesture as his account manager and love interest. His entire company came out. I invited a few of my girlfriends too. His 3 adult sons were there. We were both very comfortable. At this point, we were still exploring what we were, so we were professional. We were flirting and friendly. We were still just two people getting to know each other. He was finalizing a divorce with his third wife, so it was best to be discreet. Throughout November and December, we spent more time getting to know each other. He was moving his mother from her own condo to the Jewish home for the aging. He purchased a multi-million-dollar home in Calabasas where his soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law and niece were moving until they could get on their feet. His first wife and mother of his 3 adult sons was seeking another large sum of money. She'd never remarried. He loved Jaguars. He had recently purchased a gorgeous limited edition convertible. We were meeting more at Fleming's. I was vegetarian, so I never ate steak, but I did enjoy what I could, and I enjoyed the wine. The next date I took him on was to the Rose Bowl. It was the new year and a beautiful sunny day. At the game, we were seated near some of my colleagues, so I kept it professional. He told me he had no interest in the game and only came to be with me. I did want to see the game because it was USC versus Texas, but I was there to be with him. I did my best to take care of him on my company's dime. I made $70,000 a year. What else was I going to give this man? I had no idea how to date a wealthy 56-year-old, let alone one who was my client. Our next date that I planned, I took him to a Lakers game in my company suite. This was the first night we shared our first kiss, walking down an alley on our way from dinner to the game. Caroline, my friend and coworker, was in the suite too with her client. By now we acted like a couple. She remarked on how great our chemistry was. Max was a very busy man, so I didn't get a lot of date time. I got more client time. On occasion, we had awkward business discussions, but we always got through them. As my client, he was very good to me. Whenever I needed a client to show up to a sales pitch event hosted by my paper, he'd come. He'd purchase the best space and all the special products the paper published. He was very pleased to make sure I got paid and rewarded. I was growing more comfortable dating someone twice my age. I was 28, he was 56, and he wasn't hiding it. His white hair made him look older than his 56 years, but dyed hair wouldn't have worked on him. We got stares, but I didn't care. He didn't seem to either, and his divorce was final too. One Friday afternoon in late January, I got a phone call from him. He was in San Diego on business for the weekend. He was staying at Tower 23 on Pacific Beach, and he was hoping I would drive down to stay the weekend with him. I could only stay the night because I had a commitment that Sunday. After contemplating whether to go or not for just a short trip, I decided to go. I knew it was a big gesture that we needed to take our personal relationship to the next level. We were going to share a bed in one of my favorite cities on one of my favorite beaches. When I arrived, we shared some drinks with his business partner in the hotel bar. Shortly after, we went to bed. While lying there, he told me that it meant the world to him that I drove to San Diego. I knew this. We began to make out. We didn't have condoms, and I wasn't on birth control, so we decided not to have sex. He said he'd love to have a daughter with me, and he'd want to name her Featherina. We laughed. We lay there in silence thinking. He was on his back, and I was on my right side, turned away from him, though flush. I put my hands between my thighs because it made me feel better, because I was on fire. I had never felt this much physical pain down there from abstaining, and to this day I don't know how we did it. Eventually, we fell asleep holding each other. This is The Sex That Got Away, The Man Who Was Twice My Age, Part 3, How It Ended. The next morning, Max got up to go to his business meeting. When he finished, we went to lunch at Harbor House in Seaport Village. We walked through the restaurant. We got stares from the patrons. Max made the comment that I looked really young. I was 28 and did look much younger. I told him that I would always look young, that it was in my genes. We held hands at the table. We finished lunch and left. We cruised around a bit before we returned to the hotel. He was playing a mixtape CD of love songs that I had burned for him. I got my bag. He walked me to valet. As we waited for valet to bring my car, we hugged and said our goodbyes. As my car pulled up, I gave him one final kiss and he said, "I love you." I didn't know if that was intentional, so I asked, "You do?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "I love you too." I got in my car and drove off, happy. Valentine's Day was the next big holiday that was coming up. Max asked if I wanted to go to Vegas. He was going to check on a condo complex he had invested in, and his visit would fall over Valentine's Day. I said, of course. I was having a lovely time planning our upcoming trip. I went to the lingerie store to do some shopping. I even called him while at the mall to ask if we'd be naked on this trip. That turned him on. My days and nights were spent fantasizing about the trip. I wanted to get him something special for Valentine's Day, so I went to my favorite crystal shop where I found the perfect gift. 2 hummingbirds perched on a branch. They both had green beaks. I thought it was fitting since his last name was Green and there were feathers. I had it gift wrapped and I went on my way. I was happy. I thought about being in Vegas and eloping. How I ever thought I could elope with a man whose home I'd never visited was indicative of how naive I once was. I spent time on the hotel website. They had a jewelry store in the hotel. I had it all planned in my head. As Valentine's Day approached, Max grew more distant and vague. It was clear that something was not right. I could sense that he was not comfortable. Because of our business relationship, I didn't confront him like I would a regular guy. He eventually canceled our Vegas plans using a business emergency as an excuse. Instead, he wanted to have dinner at Fleming's. Dinner was scheduled for a couple of days after Valentine's Day. At dinner, we sat in a small, private wine tasting room surrounded by glass windows. Everyone could see in. It was not my scene at all. I was uncomfortable. I wasn't uncomfortable because I was with him. I was uncomfortable being on display. My uneasiness was subtle, though. I gave Max his gift. He loved it. He could tell it was expensive. He understood the feather green thing, the connection, and he felt badly that he canceled our plans. After that, everything went downhill. Canceled meetings, phone calls went unanswered with delayed return calls. However, I'd gotten the best news at work. I had been selected to start a new department from the ground up. This meant I would no longer be the account manager for the sales territory, and Max would no longer be my client. Then it happened. Max and I had plans. When I called to confirm, he ignored the calls. I called repeatedly. For whatever reason, he didn't have the balls to end things. Over the next weeks, I transitioned out of the role and into my new one. I transferred his account off my desk to an account manager who had managed Max's company at a different paper. Here's why. A 40-year-old named Anna, who by some men's standards was a sexy woman, was hired to take over my sales desk. She was a complete airhead, and every time she'd speak, her voice annoyed me. I didn't like her. I demanded that Maxwell's account be transferred to his old account manager. She was a 60-something married lady. There was no way in hell I was going to let Anna get near Max. First, she was his type. She was more age appropriate and perfect for a wealthy husband. Second, even if they didn't end up happily ever after, I didn't want to have to hear her talk about him every time she'd visit him. "Feather, Maxwell says hi." I would have died. Her voice was annoying. If they would have started dating, I would have been miserable. It took a lot of manipulating and convincing, but it had to be done for my sanity. There was only one other person who knew my motives for moving Maxwell off of Anna's desk, my coworker Kenneth. It had become very obvious to him that I had been seeing Maxwell.
It turned out to be pretty obvious to everyone. Kenneth confronted me about moving Maxwell off Anna's desk. He liked Anna. Kenneth had a crush on Anna. He thought it was shrewd of me to do what I did. It was self-preservation. I was free. I never spoke to Maxwell again. I did drop something off at his office. He was on the phone when I popped in to plop it on the desk. I was out as quickly as I was in. There was no need to speak. Several years later, I saw him on Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. He was parking his Jaguar. He and another nice-looking white-haired lady got out of the car together and went into a restaurant. He looked exactly the same, and I'd hoped they were dating.